Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. The first real chance for these teams to test their brand new upgrades they're bringing to the Spanish Grand Prix. Mercedes not super impressed with their changes they've made. Hamilton and Russell say they're way off the pace of where they need to be. Expect to make some improvements overnight, but this upgrade package has hardly turned around their car performance as some expected. Ferrari, their changes as well being analysed under the microscope. Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. The number 33 is everywhere right now. Of course, Alonso on the verge, if he can get it, of his 33rd win. We talked about some of these numbers yesterday. He's also in garage number 33, could you believe? All the stars are aligning for Max Verstappen to win by 33 seconds. It's probably what's going to happen this weekend on the evidence we currently have. Also, brand new power unit in both Red Bulls. They can have 4 in the season, right? So they're going to use their second. I believe that one of the other cars, maybe Norris, is now on their 3rd. So not ideal for him, but for Red Bull, no real issue. But brand new power unit in there, so makes them even scarier than they usually are this weekend. These are some of the serious changes to the upgrade, so a couple of things for the Red Bull, a little bit on the floor edge in the diffuser, fair few changes for Aston Martin, and this is the thing for Ferrari and for Mercedes. They might bring upgrades, but every other team brings upgrades as well. And look, Perez did say Red Bull are pretty much done now with major changes, so other teams will close in. They're not going to close in anywhere near fast enough to challenge for the championship. Maybe at the end of the season they don't lose a couple of races, or they don't win a couple of races, because right now Verstappen is going to be the favourite every weekend until November. That's how it looks. There's a couple of things here for Mercedes, so a couple of small things, but mainly just adding on to the changes we saw for them in Monaco. Ferrari with a brand new, well, of course we saw their engine cover and their side pods has changed quite substantially, and that actually looks like this. Rest in peace to the bathtub top version. It is a shame how things go in Formula 1 sometimes. We've got all these different beautiful ideas and concepts. The Ferrari of last year especially, they have a slightly different approach this year, but it's pretty similar, and now it's gone, right? This is their new side pod here at the bottom. It's completely flat along the top. It doesn't look as pretty as the other one did, let's be honest, right? And it looks more maybe like the car in 2019 or something, how it used to be. But yeah, this idea was so nice. Some people call it, you know, voluptuous, some of the curves on this car, but unfortunately it's now gone, and we now have this from the back. So, you know, it's still a little bit curvy, but it's not quite what it used to be, the of the F175, or of course this SF23. So it is what it is. The Ferrari have made some changes. They're hoping it's going to improve their car. FP1 though was an absolute bloodbath in favour of Max Verstappen. Perez was actually closer to 16th than he was to Verstappen in P1, so he's definitely on the forward watch as far as I'm concerned. And I mean, just have a look at this. Verstappen put in a nice lap here on the softs, went 7.5 tenths clear of Perez. At this time everyone was pretty much on the mediums doing some laps, but yeah, the Red Bulls decided to put on the, I mean, he was braking later into turn 1. I think Verstappen, he doesn't really know how to do a slow lap. He obviously is great at managing his tyres, but in every session he's always finding the limit a little bit, and it always seems like he's got so much more to get from this car. And the crazy and the scary thing for Red Bull is they hit the ground running here, no issues at all. Most Grand Prix this season they've arrived with absolutely no setup issues. They put the car on the track, they know what it's going to do, and it executes exactly what they want it to do. It's pretty terrifying actually, because not many other teams have that. It was actually though Esteban Ocon P3, and this is where we do have to wonder whether Alpine are actually being serious when they say we're going to be ahead of Mercedes at the next Grand Prix, as they were back in Monaco. I'm not sure that's going to be the case on Sunday, but on Saturday they certainly can. Their single lap pace looks pretty good, valuable as we saw of course in Monaco. These were the overall numbers from FP1, so Verstappen, Perez, 7.5 tenths down. Then Ocon, Nick de Vries for some reason, Gasly, Alonso, Magnussen. It was all over the place here. 2 Ferraris, 2 Mercedes, but look, the pack was very tightly spread down to P17, if you kind of exclude Max Verstappen, right? And a pretty similar story going forwards, but it was a bit closer. The key takeaway that some had from FP1 though was that the tyres are going to be difficult to manage. This should be at the very bare minimum a 2-stop race, and we would like to see that. Even Helmut Marko says, who knows, could even be a 3-stop race. So 2 to 3 stops with any luck, that's what we're going to have, and the final corner has helped that. I think it's more fun to see, more fun to drive, and also more challenging for the drivers, because that final corner is a bit bumpy. It's inducing some bouncing, qualifying. Also, porpoising is back a little bit as well. So even as Helmut Marko says during FP1, Alpine has taken a step forward. It's good for us when the new third party joins the competition, but they're still way behind. And honestly, if Alpine and Aston Martin are the closest challengers in qualifying to the Red Bull, that is such an embarrassing indictment on Mercedes and Ferrari on what they should have achieved, because the only excuse for Mercedes and Ferrari as well, the Red Bull, they just absolutely nailed it. There was no way we were ever going to be able to get close to that. They just did such a good job. There's nothing we could do type thing. But if it's, you know, Aston Martin and Alpine that are getting closer, then it doesn't look so good on them. And Mercedes wasn't great in FP1. Ferrari, even as, I mean, Helmut Marko says it as it is, or at least says it how it is in his mind. Ferrari too, no matter what tyres, and the long runs didn't look so good either. So Red Bull are taking the mick at this point. The Mercedes was trying to run their car very low to the ground that you could see here. Like, I think they actually had to raise it a little bit, as George Russell says, because they couldn't quite run it this low. But I think that's one of their intentions with the new suspension, the new side pod design, just the new concept in general, that they can run their car lower like Red Bull can. That seems to be the plan, and it seems like they're getting there a little bit more. And this weekend, of course, their upgrades, we get to see them. But fundamentally, every other team brings upgrades as well. So it's always kind of tricky to say how and where they're going to be. But look, as Hamilton says, they're changing train tracks. This is the track they believe can take them to closing in the second gap they have to Red Bull. And okay, it might not be quite a second in qualifying, but it's definitely a second in race pace, and we'll see that in a second. Hamilton did manage to put in a purple Sector 1. He actually had the fastest top speed, I believe, because Mercedes are running slightly lower wing than usual, and just testing out things between Hamilton and Russell. So he did put in a purple Sector 1 before then. It was 1/10 down after Sector 2. I lost about 5/10 to Verstappen in Sector 3 alone, which left him about 6/10 down. Russell was about 5/10, 4.5 down. They were switching up between the different ideas of the rear wing, which we'll see on Sunday what's better, right? Because maybe for race pace or racing in general, you kind of want the lower wing if you can to get the better top speed to enable overtaking more often. Ferrari, though, they were struggling with some issues. Their car was bouncing, and this was through the final corner at very high speed, bit bumpy through there. But not only was it bouncing through this corner, but down into turn 10 on like the second era straight, it was actually straight up porpoising, and we saw this in a few cars here, so probably a track-specific issue, but nonetheless not exactly ideal. But speaking of Mercedes, right, of course, Hamilton was asking Bono, what's the pace, right, in the long runs that they like to do in FP2? How are we looking? The race simulation runs, is it looking good? And Bono's like, look, it's going to be quite a difficult one to describe, mate. Lots to pick through there, because it was kind of all over the place. This is the comparison then. So there's obviously some outliers here, but the Verstappen on the soft tyre did a 1:19.1, 1:4.45, 4.4, and then an 18.6. That is just terrifying compared to, I mean, this is Perez on the soft, who is way slower. Okay, a couple of good laps in here, 19.5, 19.8, but most of them way slower than Max. And then we get on to the other competition where you see Hamilton was on about 24, George Russell was on about 23, Hamilton slightly quicker on the medium. And I think this is excluding some of the outlier laps that some people take them into account, some people don't. It's always difficult to say what's an outlier, what's not, because this is another thing where Verstappen was roughly at 19.3, Sainz at 19.8, Leclerc 23, and Hamilton apparently a 21.1, but I feel like there's probably some outliers that have been included, excluded, etc, etc. But Verstappen's basically a second quicker than anybody else, and that's a relatively short lap. And I mean, Perez is way off the pace as well. Don't know what's happening with him at the moment. But in qualifying simulation runs, they were closer to Verstappen. He was about 2/10 up on Alonso, and then Nico Hülkenberg with a phenomenal lap to put his Haas up to P3. Then Perez, Ocon, Leclerc, Sainz, Russell. So it was pretty close actually in quali pace, as it often is with Red Bull. But in race sims, man, it's insane how good that car is. So I wanted to share what Hamilton and Russell have to say on this. And Hamilton's basically like, look, it wasn't a great day. It was a difficult day. The car feels like the car used to feel. He doesn't feel much different in this version than the previous version, which is a pretty damning indictment in some respects on their, the package they brought as an upgrade. He says, look, overnight they can make some changes, and Russell says, it's not too bad. We should be better on Sunday, but they're not expecting a particularly competitive qualifying.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, we're fighting as hard as we can. I would say it was a difficult day one, P1 and P2. I think just getting on top of the tires and the deg, and car feels like the car.
Okay, so not too noticeably a difference then?
I mean, it's so different from last week, of course. So, but we're just focusing. I think the long run pace didn't look terrible. and we just got to work on trying to figure out how we can extract more on the single lap. I think from the pace that I had today, it's struggled for me currently to get into top 10, but hopefully we'll do some changes overnight, and hopefully I think it's very, very close between us and that like middle kind of after P5 back to kind of P10, so it's really, really close between us all. It's impressive to see how, you know, the improvements that everyone seems to have made all around us. If you look at Ocon, Alpines are doing great. You saw the Aston Martin is second, just right behind the Red Bull, which is really, really impressive. So yeah, it's not going to be easy, that's for sure.
And the weather, are you keeping one eye on it as well? Because there's rain sort of hovering around and certainly forecast for the weekend.
Yeah, well, weather can always be a helping hand, given that we're not as quick as we'd like to be. But yeah, I'm just going to try and do the best job I can tonight to make the right setup changes, and there's definitely improvements I know I can make with the setup, so I'll get on top of that.
I think we learn a huge amount, and we'll dig into the data tonight. We know that we're not Friday specialists, and we often take a bit of a step forward on Saturday and Sunday, so it's the right way round for it to be. But you know, we are where we are. I think a lot of people are bringing updates to the car. We weren't expecting to suddenly set the world on fire, and we just need to learn what we can from the info we've got and try and move forward tomorrow.
And on the other hand, for what the Mercedes guys are saying, Verstappen says this: we had a very good day. I felt comfortable in the car in both the short and the long runs. They felt great. This circuit is much more fun to drive with the adjustments. I am positively surprised. So, I mean, if that doesn't tell you Verstappen's winning the race on Sunday and getting pole tomorrow, I don't know what it's going to be honest, because it's just, you know, it's very predictable at the moment, and you can understand why, because both Verstappen and Red Bull are operating at 100% capacity. And here we go again. These are the leaders of FP2 over the last 7 years, and 6 of them have gone on to take pole position in qualifying, which more than likely might well happen again tomorrow. That's certainly the way the bookies will see it. However, there are some questions about rain. Once again, as we saw in Monaco, rain and thunderstorm warnings have been issued for, I think, maybe a 60% chance of rain in quali. There might be a small chance in the race as well, so that might spice things up, but nonetheless, I'm looking forward to qualifying because it does look like it's going to be competitive. Mercedes will need to qualify well, though, if they have any intention of making moves come Sunday. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.